Steeler fans, it is time for another edition of the Know Your Enemy podcast. My name is Michael Beck, your deputy editor from BehindTheSteelCurtain.com, and I'm joined by the film guru himself, one Mr. Geoffrey Benedict. Geoffrey, how you doing tonight, sir?
I'm doing great. Doing great, Michael.
Beautiful stuff. Now, of course, you and I are going to kind of get into, of course, the Steelers' final preseason game that will be played on Friday night. But kind of the big news of the week, really the last couple hours here, is one Mr. Antoine Brooks being released due to an injury. Are you surprised by that? Like, considering how good he's had of an offseason, it sounded like he was ready to step up to be that kind of nickel-type player. It seemed like he was trending in the right direction. He was just a draft pick from 2020. And all of a sudden, he's just gone. Is this surprising to you, or what are your overall thoughts on this move?
I think it's kind of a shock to what we expected to see on the roster. But I think it's likely he'll clear waivers, and we'll see then if the Steelers decide to keep him or just release him. Like, that would be the surprise. If they release him with an injury settlement, I'd be more surprised. If he's on IR, that makes sense. But that really affects the nickel corner position, because he was kind of favored for that. And then you saw Arthur Millette, who was trying to kind of fit into the team and try and find his way. He seemed to be doing better, and then he's also hurt. So you've got, this guy who needs time to get into the Steelers system is missing time. And the guy who was the front runner for the job is out. And now we're talking about, James Pierre coming in nickel and playing outside, and Cameron Sutton being the nickel back. But there's multiple problems with that. But one of the biggest ones is, who's behind that? Like, who's your next guy in? The Steelers don't have anyone who plays inside left. Like, who's after that is you got, like, Justin Lane, and then the bottom of the depth chart guys. Well, Justin Lane's an outside corner. He doesn't play in the slot. When they played him in dime last year, he played outside and slid someone else in. And both Cameron Sutton and Steven Nelson could slide inside. You're moving Joe Hayden inside. If you've got Joe Hayden, James Pierre, and Justin Lane on the field, you've got three outside cornerbacks. Who's playing where? Like, that's the thing to me, is behind Cameron Sutton, who is it? Who's your number, who's your number 4 cornerback behind Cameron Sutton, James Pierre, and of course Joe Hayden? This to me is like a serious depth issue right now.
Now, one of the stories that ran on Behind the Steel Curtain today was talking about Trey Norwood and how he could be looking at some reps there. Is that a Band-Aid that you think makes sense, or should this team be on the market trying to find some suitable replacements, or at least some depth at that inside corner spot?
I have been wanting to see Trey Norwood get snaps in dime, and they haven't done it. He hasn't had any. He's been playing backup free safety. He comes in when Minka's out. That's it. Which I get. He is Minka's backup. That makes sense. But now, yeah, you're kind of throwing him in, not just in dime, but in nickel, right? It's not even like a question of who we have for dime. We don't even know who our nickel back is right now. It's a bad spot to be in. And I really do think the Steelers need to go out and add somebody when cuts start getting made, when the serious cuts happen. Steelers are going to have to seriously consider going and getting somebody, because they don't have much.
Yeah, and speaking of cuts, there's one last kind of rodeo for these guys to make an impression on the team. Of course, the roster is now down to 80 players. 10 players have already gotten the axe, but they got to get down to 53 before putting together a little practice squad for themselves of 16 players, I do believe. But, of course, Friday night, Pittsburgh Steelers taking on the Carolina Panthers. In your opinion, who needs to perform the most, or else will they be facing eviction from the Steelers locker room?
Well, a slightly bigger, obviously, all the guys at the bottom of the roster, like your Shakur Browns, Rico Bussey, Mark Gilbert, these guys, they obviously have to show up and do something. But for slightly bigger names than that, Benny Snell's a big one. Like, he's got one game. And in my opinion, watching the preseason so far, like, let me ask you this one. Do the Steelers have a 4th running back right now?
I don't think they carry one.
Yeah, Najee Harris is number 1, clearly. and then you've got McFarland and Balaj. Would you keep anyone else you've seen run?
No.
Like, none of them are worth keeping. We normally carry 4 backs. So there's not even like a 4th running back right now. So yeah, Benny Snell's playing for his life right now. Like this is for his, not just Steelers, but if he can put on a good show here, maybe someone else takes a flyer on him, because I don't think he's going to make it. I don't think Jalen Samuels is going to make it. Like,
yeah, no, it's the end of the line for those guys. In all honesty, like, this game, for as important it is for making their own roster, a deep team like the Steelers, their cuts need to be showing off for other teams. And that's something that I got to keep in mind. Sure, they could line up on the Steelers practice squad, but playing on a team that has a little bit of depth, if things go sideways, you could make your way onto another roster after cuts are done. So that could be exactly what happens with one Benny Snell. To kind of bring things to another position, and something we talked about a little bit, Brooke Pryor of ESPN today was talking about how Eric Ebron isn't a cut candidate, but because of the development of Pat Freiermuth, there's all this, according to her, there could be the potential that he could be on the trade market because the Steelers are so high on the rookie tight end. Do you think the Steelers could be looking at making an extra move there? I believe you're on Twitter today also talking about this, but what are your thoughts on the tight end position and whether or not the Steelers should be looking at deals for one Mr. Eric Ebron?
Okay, well, I've talked about H-backs before, right? The H-back position in Matt Canada's offense can be any number of players from an actual position, right? It can be your number 2 tight end. It can be your fullback. It can be a running back playing out like a fullback, kind of like, or like a tight end. Basically, that flex position there is really an H-back because they take on all kinds of weird roles. There's different routes, stuff like that. Ebron and Pat Freiermuth have both been spending times in that H-back role and as an inline tight end, which are very different positions in Matt Canada's offense. I honestly think for this offense to work well, you want both of those tight ends. I think you want Eric Ebron. I think you want Pat Freiermuth both. And they'll probably keep a Zach Gentry to be like your more inline. If you want a blocking tight end to be in line, he's your dude. You bring in for that. But honestly, for me, I think the Steelers need both these guys. They're like, if Pat Freiermuth ends up being, eventually in the class of a Heath Miller as far as overall talent, I think he's going to be a more dynamic receiver. I don't know if he'll reach the overall level of Heath Miller. But Eric Ebron and Pat Freiermuth could already be the best 2-deep tight end room the Steelers have had. Right? They like who's your competition there? Heath Miller didn't have anybody behind him. It was always Matt Spaeth. They were, great blockers, but Matt Spaeth wasn't a receiving threat. It'd be like, in my opinion, it'd be like if Ladarius Green, when he came and was healthy for a bit and actually looked good, if he had been playing with Heath Miller, that's like what we're kind of looking at here. You keep that. You keep that. We saw in 2018 when Jesse James and Vance McDonald both put up good numbers for the Steelers at tight end. You could do that again. Like, we don't have to play 3 receivers every snap.
Yeah, it's funny that you mentioned that, because I did write that story a couple weeks ago that this could be the best tight end room the Steelers have ever featured. Not that that's a hard thing to accomplish. And people are still like, oh, no way. Look at Heath Miller and Matt Spaeth. Like, Matt Spaeth was basically a tackle that sometimes run a route at like a 5.5 40. So like maybe pump the brakes on that one. But Heath Miller's the greatest tight end in franchise history, period. Who's number 2? There's a couple guys that had a decent good season here and there, but I digress. This is a special spot, I think, for this team. And like you said, I think they need to hold on to both guys. Getting into this matchup, though. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Geoffrey. Go ahead.
To add a little bit more to that, Eric Ebron needed less snaps last season. He needed to play less last season. Pat Freiermuth, you don't want him playing, every single snap. No, rotate these guys. Tight ends wear down. They're big dudes that are getting hit in their knees. Like, they wear down. Give them a little break, play them a little less. Fresh legs, man.
Yeah, absolutely. So for this game coming up too, we've already heard some news that a number of the starters, and I think it's pretty safe to assume that all the starters won't be playing this preseason finale against the Carolina Panthers. We know Dwayne Haskins is a start, and Josh Dobbs is backing him up, and that's it for quarterbacks. Now, we should probably dive into this a little bit. Can we read anything into this with those two guys starting? Is Mason Rudolph the definitive number 2 guy? Is there a competition for that third spot? Could either of these guys be on the chopping block? What are your thoughts here with this quarterback rotation for Friday's game?
Well, it hasn't been a real quarterback competition yet. It's one of those categories where we're not handing the job to Mason Rudolph, but unless he stinks and Dwayne Haskins is amazing, Rudolph's going to be the number 2, and they've been close enough. It really hasn't been that big a deal. The Steelers clearly don't want to push Haskins into a make or break season here. They want to give him time to really learn Matt Canada's offense. They want to give him time to develop on this team and be that guy possibly next season who can, kick a Mason Rudolph off the roster maybe. Josh Dobbs and Dwayne Haskins, these are your guys that are. Dwayne Haskins is developing and Josh Dobbs is auditioning, right, for a spot anywhere in the NFL. They love Josh, but he's not going to be here. We're not carrying four quarterbacks. So for me, I think Haskins clearly is the number 3. I think Rudolph's clearly the number 2. Ben's obviously number 1. Unless Dwayne Haskins comes out and is just starts absolutely tearing up the Carolina Panthers starting offense with starting defense with our second stringers, and it's a one-man show type deal. It's just he's number 3. The Steelers never wanted a quarterback competition. It's not this year. That's going to come next year.
Yeah, no, I fully agree with that. And it'll be interesting to see if the Steelers still have Ben Roethlisberger from a year from now, if they draft someone else. But that is a story for another time. For the quarterbacks this year, is there any way, we know the relationship Ben has with Dobbs, is there any way, if he's the definitive 4th guy, they could sneak him in as a veteran practice squad player just to have Ben's buddy and kind of a sideline go-to guy there with him?
See, I don't think they do that. I don't think they've ever carried 4 quarterbacks like that. I'm trying to think of. I can't think of any time where they've done that. Normally, wasn't it even when it was when in 2019 when Devlin Hodges ended up playing, it was Ben Roethlisberger and Mason Rudolph on the roster and Hodges on the practice squad. If they're going to carry Dwayne Haskins on the active roster and just have him on the 53-man roster and just have him inactive every week, they're not going to carry a practice squad quarterback. I don't think they do that. I think Josh Dobbs he's playing to go somewhere else.
Oh, man. Could the Steelers fleece another draft pick out of Josh Dobbs? They got a 5th for him out of Jacksonville. Could they trade him back there, get another 5th? Is that an option?
Maybe get, that'd be great if someone was desperate and traded for Josh Dobbs. It'd be fantastic if Josh Dobbs actually went out there and just straight out was incredible this game and someone offered him a pick. That would be great. But I doubt it. Teams have seen that he's not really that guy, right?
Yeah, I think he's just a good room guy that you hope never has to play. But we saw in packages mixed with Mason Rudolph that the Steelers were able to use his legs a little bit last year. So I think there is a way for him to fit on the right roster. If Dwayne Haskins wasn't here, I think Dobbs is back once again. And if Rudolph were to play a game, I think Josh Dobbs would be right back in that kind of running quarterback sub-package type set. So I think there will be a job for him, probably not ending up in Pittsburgh. However, now we also did learn that the Carolina Panthers intend on starting everyone when it comes to this week's game against the Steelers. Is that something that worries you, or is that something that's okay, now we can kind of see what we really have in our backups, because they're going up against an NFL team's number 1s. Is this something that should be able to help the guys that are viewed more as backups, or is this something that you might be worried about?
I'm excited for it. because I like a lot. There's a lot of players. There's a lot of players on Carolina that I actually liked, players that I've wanted in the draft or really liked through in college. One of them is, from Penn State, Yaturma Gross-Matos. He's going to be on that defensive line. Like I'd love to see them put Dan Moore on his side. Like, let's see Dan Moore versus Yaturma Gross-Matos, because that guy's good. I'd love to see that. So that's kind of where I stand. Is like, I want to see some of these matchups. I want to see some of the guys who are competing. I'm interested to see what receivers will actually play, because they're not going to sit all four, wide receivers that got significant play time last year. So we'll see who actually plays from the wide receivers, and we'll see how they do. I'm very interested to see how it all works out. I want to see if they can, get some run lanes open for I guess it'll be McFarland or Balaj, whoever plays first. But I am interested. I'm also interested in the defense, seeing how some of these younger guys do facing tougher competition. I think there's some real important matchups to watch, some roster battles on our defense that may get decided against, the Carolina starters. Guys like, what defensive linemen are we keeping? What defensive linemen are we letting go? You've got the Quincy Roche, Jameer Jones. Like, are you keep both of them? Do you keep one? I'm very interested in seeing Buddy Johnson play, against good competition finally. After he's been kind of relegated to the back of the line and didn't even play on defense against the Lions. So there are some things I'm interested in seeing. And I think, sorry, I think there's a lot of benefit for these guys having the chance to put on film them playing against NFL starters. I think that's going to be of great benefit to them, especially if they do well. I got my camera to work.
We'll get back into this game in a second, but since you mentioned Dan Moore Jr., and we'll get into some more kind of competitions for roles later on in the show, but I really want to get to Dan Moore now. Do you think he has played himself into that swing tackle spot? He's played both sides. He's been very successful. He's had the most pass rushing plays, snaps throughout the entire preseason, and he's allowed 0 sacks, I believe 0 pressures. So he's had a fantastic camp and preseason. Has he won that swing tackle job, in your opinion?
I think he has. Joe Hegg hasn't looked that good, and Dan Moore Jr. has looked really, really good. Also it's funny because if you look at the PFF grades, you look at these numbers. This is what Kevin Dotson did to start the season. This is what Kevin Dotson was doing early in 2020, and so I think Dan Moore Jr. has earned that swing tackle spot and is pushing Chukwuma Okorafor. Like he is not in competition with him yet, but he's giving him a push.
Now, this is a question that's been asked on a lot of shows. Jeff Hartman asked it to me, and Dave Schofield and Brian Anthony Davis. So I'll ask it to you too, because I think it's relevant in this conversation. Is the Steelers' current offensive line, the one that is projected to start week 1, Okorafor, Dotson, Kendrick Green, Turner, Banner, is that going to be the same starting 5 at the end of the year if they're all healthy?
That's right.
It's a really tough question.
I'm going to go yes. I think
that would be best.
I think barring injury, Dan Moore Jr. is going to be treated exactly like Kevin Dotson was, right? You're the next man up. And he's going to be that guy. He's going to be the next man up. We're going to see him as a 6th offensive lineman. Albeit, I don't think as much as we've used it in the past, because Zach Gentry's been a heck of a blocker. I think they're going to use him as the tight end who can block. But yeah, he'll get in the minute anyone gets hurt. But yeah, I think they're going to do the same to him that they did to Dotson.
Is he the starting left tackle next year? Okorafor's deal's up. He's trending upward fast.
He's starting somewhere on that line. Like it's left or right, he's on it. He's going to be starting. And I think Banner's still signed.
He signed 2 years, season. I believe.
Yeah. And also, sneaky thing, Banner has looked really good. He hasn't played much, but when he did, he looked really good. He looked better than
13
he did
snaps.
last season when he looked good. So Banner's looking good.
Interesting. It'll be fun to follow this, especially with how many people have said the Steelers' offensive line is this, it's that, it's terrible, blah blah blah. And all of a sudden, it seems like they got some dudes. So that's a little on the exciting side. But again, for this Friday's game, is there any Panthers players that you're kind of really excited to see? Like I know you talked about Gross Matos. Is there anyone else that kind of jumps out to you that's like, oh yeah, like I really want to see this guy do his thing, and maybe someone you hoped would have been a Steeler in the draft or anything along those lines. So what do you think on Carolina Panthers?
Well, some of the guys that we looked at, even in our previews of the before the draft, Schobert, I'm interested to see him. I liked him in college. I'm interested to see what he brings. Tommy Tremble was a player I really thought, and KT Smith, another guy in our site, he was big on Tommy Tremble and how he would fit well in Matt Canada's offense. Obviously, we went and got Pat Freiermuth, who is like a higher pedigree version of those guys and a better receiver, but he was a guy I was very interested in. He was one of the guys I wanted. He went to Carolina. Trying to think of who else. There's a couple other players on there that I really like. But yeah, I'm excited to see a lot of them. Oh, the quarterback situation too with Will Grier and PJ Walker, the kid that was in the XFL. I like seeing those depth guys that are playmakers, and I like seeing how they test the defensive players. And it should be interesting because those are mobile guys, right? So if they get to play against some of the Steelers who are trying to make this roster, especially in our pass rush, like when you get like Quincy Roche and Jameer Jones chasing around Will Grier and PJ Walker, that'd be fun.
Now, if the Panthers are starting their starters for, say, half of football, is there any hope that the Steelers win this game? It's the preseason, after all. Is this maybe a good juju to not have an undefeated preseason about to be shattered, or could our backups really take a full-blown NFL squad?
See, I actually think there is a little bit of benefit in the Steelers' favor here, simply with the approach to the game. Because a lot of the players starting, this is your last chance to win a job, right? The guys that the Steelers are going to be starting are guys who are competing. They are guys who are competing for time, competing for snaps, competing for a place on the roster. And on Carolina's side, you're going to have a lot of players who are just, especially like Sam Darnold, like he just wants to get out of there unhurt, right? That's all you want to do in the preseason. Get your time in and get out of there, right? He's going to be trying to play it safe, and the Steelers are going to be trying to rip people's heads off. So I think there's a chance the Steelers do well early on, simply because they have that motivation and they have the gumption factor. They're going to probably want it a bit more.
Now, are you glad the Steelers aren't playing Ben Roethlisberger in this game? Do you think he's a guy that needs to play a little bit closer to the season? He looked great last week. He looked absolutely unbelievable. If you get 4 quarters of that out of Ben, you're going to be blowing out teams each and every week. But are you disappointed at all? Is there worry there could be some rust when they take on the Buffalo Bills?
No, I'm not worried about it. I'm not. The way he looked was fantastic. I'm more in the category of, slow it down, Ben. Like, save midseason for him for the midseason. That kind of a thing. It's a 17-game season now. We'd like to play 3 games after that. Don't be in midseason form week 1. So I'm perfectly fine with him setting and just not doing anything. Yeah.
Yeah, no, it makes sense. There's 2 sides to that coin, and having a 39-year-old quarterback in a very long season, there's nothing wrong with having him as rested as possible for old, slim Ben Roethlisberger, his 18th professional football season. So that'll be a lot of fun to watch that. And, of course, this week's game, the final game of the preseason, is there any major storylines from the Steelers sense that you're most keen on watching in this game? Is there any position battle that's the most important that if you wanted to watch one specific player or one specific spot, that's the one that Steeler fans need to be watching, because it could be a job on the line. It could be a starting job on the line. If there's one that jumps out to you, could you let the people know?
Yeah, anything with cornerbacks, those defensive backs. Again, as we say, the nickel situation is kind of a mess right now. Obviously, they have the plan for Pierre and Sutton in the slot. If I can go off your question really quick, I don't like Cameron Sutton in the slot, in the nickel. I don't like that, because that has a lot of run responsibility. It has a lot of blitzing to do, and Cameron Sutton doesn't do that. He is a coverage specialist, right? That was his job when he came in and dime. He was a coverage specialist. So he doesn't fit what we were having Mike Hilton do in the nickel at all. He doesn't really fit that. It's a very different player. So for me, if you're playing a team like the Ravens, like last year when we played the Ravens and Cameron Sutton was our nickel, we actually swapped him to safety and moved Terrell Edmonds into nickel, into the cornerback in the slot. That didn't work well, because you lost a lot of your communication that Minkah Fitzpatrick and Terrell Edmonds have, and they missed some switches. Like, some switches needed to be made, and they didn't. We gave up a touchdown where Miles Boykin was being covered by Vince Williams and man with like no help. And you can see right before the snap, Terrell Edmonds is like motioning, but he's in the slot. He's not a safety, and the other guys aren't even looking at him. Like, he's not back there where he can really talk to him, and touchdown. They ended up, like, the Steelers in the second half of that game played their 3-4 set and used Bud Dupree, was basically their nickel back, because the Ravens were just running straight at Cameron Sutton if he was in there. So I don't like that. And the fact that that's why they were kind of looking and saying, hey, we can do a rotation, because if we're playing a team that runs a lot out of 3 wide receiver sets, we can play Antoine Brooks Jr. We can play him against those teams, right? So that's a big position to watch. See if any of these guys can make this roster by saying, hey, I can be that guy. You didn't give me a chance, but if you need me, I can be that guy, and kind of be the other option, or be a guy that can tide him over until Millette is back and ready to play. That's a big position to watch. Watch everything at that nickel position, especially, close to the line of scrimmage, any run plays, anything like that. Excuse me. The other one would be, I had another one. I think running back's important to watch too. Because I don't think Ballage or what's his name?
Snell, Samuels,
McFarland and Ballage, I don't think they've really pulled too far apart from each other, right? So I'm interested to see that. It's interesting to see if Benny Snell can do something and make something of this. I also think there's some players that have a chance to make the roster or not this game. Guys like Zach Gentry, Kevin Rader, Trey Edmonds. There's a lot of players out there trying to make a roster here. They could miss or hit here based on this game.
Yeah, no, you're 100% on the money on that one. And in this game specifically, like we talked about, the Steelers are going to be playing a ton of backups. The Panthers, who knows how long their starters will play, but they are planning on playing their guys. Why should Steelers fans be tuning into this one? Even a casual Steelers fan that might be thinking to themselves, oh, Ben's not playing, TJ's not playing, Mick is not playing. What's the point of watching? It's the 4th preseason game. What are some reasons to actually be invested in watching the Steelers play this week against the Carolina Panthers?
Well, the first one's Dan Moore Jr. Come watch him play. Watch some of the other young guys that are trying. Buddy Johnson, what do we have in that kid? He has looked very promising, but not polished, right? He's not really NFL ready right now, but he has shown a lot of promise. Come watch that kid play. Like these guys, those are a couple of players that are the future, right? They are significant for the future. You're going to get to see Trey Norwood, play in the slot, play in the nickel sub. So there's some places there that you're going to be watching the future of this team. It's also going to be interesting to see who plays on wide receiver and how they do. See if James Washington can come out and just really look good with Dwayne Haskins. Dwayne Haskins hasn't thrown to any of our top receivers, like much at all. We're not going to go out there with none of those guys. He might even get 2 of them to throw to for a little bit. So I'm very interested to see that. how he throws to those guys. And that's another big one is Dwayne Haskins. You're looking at guys who may be very key to the future of the Pittsburgh Steelers next year and beyond in Dwayne Haskins, Buddy Johnson, even a guy like Trey Norwood, Dan Moore Jr. These guys are going to be important parts in the future.
Absolutely. Now, we are at the halfway point of our show. We're going to transition to the second part. If you are watching on YouTube or Facebook, just hang tight. We will be back for the second half of Know Your Enemy in just a moment. If you're listening on your podcast platform, click over to part 2. We will be back with Know Your Enemy in just a moment. So click over or hang tight if you're on YouTube or Facebook. Alrighty, Pittsburgh Steelers fans, it is time for the second half of our show, that show being Know Your Enemy, of course. My name is Michael Beck, joined with Geoffrey Benedict, and we are hanging out tonight. The first half of the show, we really tried to focus on the Steelers-Panthers matchup that we will see in this finale of the preseason for the Pittsburgh Steelers, of course, heading into this matchup 3-0 with a perfect record on the line. Not that that really matters in the preseason, but I guess that's what's at stakes here. The second half today, we're going to kind of look at the Steelers training camp up to this point, because really it's basically over, basically into the regular work week for the team now, where we think the cuts are going to be, because they'll come very quickly after this final preseason game is played. So, Geoffrey, as we sit here right now, what are your overall thoughts on the Steelers preseason and your kind of biggest takeaways from the 3 games and all the reports that have come out at training camp over the last couple of weeks?
My key takeaways, number 1 was Ben Roethlisberger's play. He didn't play much, but what he showed in that was, what we haven't really seen since I'd say 2017. I don't think we've seen Ben play like that since 2017. So that's a big one. That's the biggest takeaway to me. After that, Pat Freiermuth, Najee Harris, and Kevin Dotson. The Matt Canada offense with these young players is going to be really, really good. I should say they have the potential to be really, really good. They have the potential to be really, really good on offense. And one of the other takeaways I'd have is most of the holes on defense are filled. Most of the holes are filled across the board. Most of them are filled. And there's a few spots to concern with, but that's a big takeaway. Most of them are filled. And I think this team is in a really good spot heading into the regular season.
Yeah, I think for me, my biggest takeaway is that this team, for much of the offseason, we're seeing to ourselves, they could be really good. They could be average. They could be really bad. Like, there's a ton of question marks. And at this stage, I feel like those question marks have been answered all in the positive direction to a team that still has a shot to compete for a championship. Will it be a hard road? Absolutely. But at least they put together the personnel that is talented enough to at least have a shot. I think that's what we have. Now, you mentioned Najee Harris, and today Coach Tomlin was kind of breaking down the players that, or at least some of them, that who will and who won't be playing. When asked about Najee Harris specifically, Coach Tomlin said he wouldn't be playing in this game, and then he was kind of questioned on that because early in the preseason, Coach Tomlin said Najee Harris would be playing in every single preseason game. Answering that question, he said something along the lines of, yeah, I did say that, and then winked at the reporter. To me, what that says is that Najee Harris has left a very big, very huge impression on this coaching staff, that this guy's a dude, this guy's already looked at as a vet, this guy's earned his stripes, and this kid's going to be special. And I think we've seen some of those in a number of runs already, just this preseason alone. Do you agree with that, Geoffrey? Is that why the change of tune is coming from the Steelers coaching staff?
Absolutely. Najee Harris has earned it. He really has. And I think it's more of a situation where they're going to have to be like, hey, Najee, you're sitting this one out. Like, it's a long season. You don't need to go out there and win a preseason game for us. Like, we don't need you to do that. We need you week 1. We need you week 17. We need you week 18, 19, and hopefully, the end of the season here. So very, very pleased with him, very pleased with his production, very pleased with the talent he shows, the vision, the instincts. he is something else.
Yeah, it really is. Honestly, I had to write an article about this because all the reports on the rookies coming out of camp, they've been really, really good. And it seems like each and every one of them will make some sort of an impact, if not as a direct starter and a direct player that's going to be getting the ball a ton, as a primary backup. And that's pretty much the case with each and every one of those 9 picks they made. And that comes on the heels of every single draft pick of the 2020 class making the team last year. Do you think this is a special draft class that could touch what the Steelers did maybe in 2017, getting 4 impact starters from that class? Could it be better than that? Is this one of those draft classes that you look at now and you say, wow, good job, Kevin Colbert. You really made this team something special with your picks.
Well, let's go through it really quick. I mean, you start with Najee Harris. He looks legit. And he is going to be the best running back that has been on the field since Le'Veon Bell before his second injury. Okay, before he lost his speed. I think he's already at that late Le'Veon Bell level. I think he's more talented, and I think he's going to be a Le'Veon Bell, and he could even outplay Le'Veon Bell if he stays healthy, because Bell lost all his speed. He had a couple of injuries. He lost a lot of speed, and he was never, quite as effective as he had been. He was still great back, but he just was never as dynamic as he should have been if those injuries hadn't taken their toll like that. You've got Pat Freiermuth, who looks like he could be the best. He could push Heath Miller for being the best tight end the Steelers have ever had. Like, he looks that good as a rookie, that he has that level of potential. Kendrick Green, his upside is Pouncey level. He has Pouncey level upside. Doesn't have the consistency. He's not as NFL ready as Pouncey was. That's why he's a 3rd round pick and not a 1st. But he has that level of ability. And then you've got Dan Moore Jr., who looks like an absolute steal at this point. You've got Buddy Johnson, who's showing the kind of talent and a few flashes that he has the ability that he's going to be something special. You've got the punter, right? So that's another impact player, even in the 7th round. I mean, he's a kicker. It's not that big a deal, but it's still a player. And I'd say Trey Norwood looks like he's a guy who's going to stick around. Like, they're already expanding his job. They're not protecting him as much. So I think there's some decent depth picks, but at the top there, I think you've got 4 guys who look like they could be impact starters. Frankly, all 4 of them could be impact starters this year. It's just whether Dan Moore gets the chance or not.
Yeah, I 100% agree with that. Like, even Isaiah Loudermilk's getting these rave reviews from his teammates. He seems like he's going to be a guy for kind of that next generation on Steelers defensive line when they try to transition to the younger guys from the old guard that are still playing at a very high level. So he won't be getting any opportunity anytime soon. Quincy Roche, he looks like he's a stud pass rusher, but the Steelers have a lot of those, and might have someone even better than Jameer Jones, which is pretty crazy. So, this draft class is one that could really turn the tide. If you string draft classes like this year after year for a number of years, you're contenders, and you're contending for at least 5 years. And really, that's all you can ever hope for. And hopefully this is kind of the kind of diamond in the crown at the end of Kevin Colbert's Steelers tenure. But what do you think of the other new guys? Now, since the last time we talked, we hadn't seen Joe Schobert play his first Steelers action. Is he going to be a dude for this team? Is that like an A+ pickup for the Steelers? Just one game in?
I don't know if I'd say A+, but it's definitely in the A category. He looked slow in the way that, like, he's still thinking, but I mean, he hadn't even been there a full week. Like, he hasn't been on the team a week yet, and he's not. So he's getting his feet wet. I think he's probably has to play this week. You almost think he'd have to get some snaps in the defense and be able to call, put him in there and give him a bunch of backups and let him try and call the defense and tell him what to do. See how it works, But I liked what I saw. I think he is going to fit very well with Devin Bush once they get accustomed to each other. I really think they fit well together.
Okay. we've broken down a couple position battles before on the show already, but let's get into some other ones. Of course, we started off earlier today with Dan Moore over Joe Hagan. We're in agreement on that. Also talked about the running backs, and I will get your thoughts on this, but we pretty much kind of outlined who we thought was going to win these spots. But behind Najee Harris, how does this depth chart round out?
I think you've got Najee, and then Ballage and McFarland are different backs. So I think you're going to see Ballage more as Najee's backup and McFarland as the change of pace guy. So I think they'll both get snaps based on, how much they're running and how much rest they want, how much snaps they want to give, how many touches they want to give Najee Harris. But that's really it. I think that's kind of a balanced situation. They're going to use both of them, kind of how they use Jalen Samuels and Benny Snell to back up James Conner, based on the situation and what they were looking at. So I think both of them will play, and I don't think anyone behind them at this point matters.
I agree with that, and the way I'd rank them, the depth chart it might be better to rank them based on like touches. Of course, Najee Harris at the top. Then I think Anthony McFarland gets the next most, and Kalen Ballage after that. But I think those are the three.
I agree.
Quarterback, we don't really need to spend any time on. Dobbs is the guy getting cut. Haskins is 3. Rudolph is 2. Roethlisberger's 1. Whether you like it or not, that's just the way that this cookie's going to crumble. Tight end, there is a competition for that third spot between Gentry and Rader. Gentry, of course, you have a little bit more size there. He might be a better, more consistent blocker, but then with Rader, you get an impact special teams player and a pretty darn good blocker as well, and someone who's very willing to get his nose dirty in those kind of greasy areas of the field. But where do you see this one shaking out?
Well, I would watch to see how they play him this time, because I was surprised watching the game against the Lions to see Zach Gentry on the field with Ben Roethlisberger in a game where they played both Eric Ebron and Pat Freiermuth. They made sure to get Zach Gentry snaps with the first team offense in line at tight end. He's a heck of a blocker. He's really going to be that role. And here's the thing. It's a weird thing in Canada's offense. It's not so much there's a number 1 tight end and a number 2 tight end and a number 3 tight end. There's like spots. There's your inline tight end spot, and there's more of your H-back moving around spot. But inside of that, you have kind of this blocking role that will just show up in the game. It's not like they only show up when the starter needs a break, or like, third period, or they're only in for the second tight end, or if someone's injured. No, he'll come in, and we saw that where Zach Gentry was on the field with 3 wide receivers, a running back, Ben Roethlisberger, and he was the tight end. You got Najee Harris, Zach Gentry, and Ben Roethlisberger, and I was just stunned to see that. But that's kind of a Canada thing. So for me, if you want to go overall situation, I think Zach Gentry has it largely wrapped up, unless we see Kevin Rader out there first. In which case you can say, okay, maybe they just, we're giving these guys shots at different times and they're going to balance it, because sometimes Tomlin will do that. But seeing Jack Gentry out there with the first string makes me think he's got this locked up.
Yeah, you know what? Kevin Rader bursted on the scene last year. I believe it was the Colts game when he was knocking heads on kickoff team and making some blocks. So I still think he has a shot. It'll be interesting. Maybe they settle with the size, but you don't really know, and we'll find that one. I think that one's a tighter one than a lot of people may think, and it'll be interesting to see how that one shakes out. But the last kind of offensive position where I'd say there really is a position battle, because Kendrick Green's already kind of wrapped up that center spot. The 5th wide receiver position is still up in the air. Right now, it really feels like it's Ray McLeod or one of like 6 dudes. To me, I think Matthew Sexton might actually be leading the way, and really this game kind of determines who's going to win that spot, because I wouldn't be surprised no matter which way it kind of winds up. But who do you think is going to be the 5th receiver, and do they have to be a kick returner if that's what they kind of go with at that spot?
Well, the way the roster is built right now, the punt returner, there's no other punt returner on the roster. The 5th wide receiver has got to be the punt returner. So I think that really limits it kind of down to Sexton and Ray McLeod, which to me is actually kind of sad, because I've liked some of the other guys. Anthony Johnson has made plays on special teams, and he's shown a bit, but he hasn't gotten much time. He didn't get much time. Then there's some other guys who are looking pretty good, but yeah, I think it's basically Sexton or McLeod.
Yeah, that's kind of the way that I'm thinking it shakes down too. Sexton's been the more dynamic returner this year, so it'll be kind of interesting to see where that goes. But flipping things over to the defensive side of the football, the one spot we've talked a lot about. We talked a lot about it before the draft. Then we talked about it a ton after the draft because they drafted another guy at the spot. But the interior defensive line, my goodness, is that room filled to the gills? Who is getting the axe? Because we know there's a ton of dudes there, and at least one of them is going to get chopped. They just cannot physically keep all of them. And like maybe they squeeze someone on the practice roster, but it just does not seem likely.
Yeah. And here's the interesting thing to me is, do they keep 7? Do they keep 6 or do they keep 7 on the defensive line is going to be a thing to watch. Because if they only keep 6, they sometimes only keep 6. Right now, you've got the first 4 are Hayward, Tuitt, Alu, Wormley. Behind that, consistently, we've seen Henry Mondeau. When the starters are out, it's Wormley and Mondeau every time. And when they've put Carlos Davis and Isaiah Loudermilk in as kind of rotating in early in a game, they haven't done as well. So I think Henry Mondeau is kind of locked into your number 5 spot. He also plays a lot of special teams. He has a lot of value there. That's big. So I think Mondeau is really locked into the number 5 spot. And at that point, you've got Carlos Davis, Isaiah Buggs, and Isaiah Loudermilk sitting there fighting for the number for potentially 1 spot, maybe 2. I think Isaiah Buggs, from some of the comments he's had, I think he's the most likely cut there. But he's also one of the few guys they've been playing at nose tackle. They've actually put him in at nose tackle before Carlos Davis. So there's a lot of question marks there. That is a really interesting battle, and that is one that I think is key in this game is who's playing the best of Carlos Davis, Isaiah Loudermilk, and Isaiah Buggs, and can 2 of them play well enough to convince the Steelers to keep 7 defensive linemen?
I think they have to carry 7 again, just with the amount of talent they got. Carlos Davis, we also got to keep in mind, he's running down a kickoff. He's in that Mondeau role now. He's the special teams defensive lineman. I don't know. I've been saying it all along that Isaiah Buggs is the one that's going to get the snips, and I'm going to stick with it. I'm going to let it roll at this point. That's my guess.
Keeping 7 defensive linemen and getting rid of Isaiah Buggs seems to make the most sense because it allows you to keep all your young talent, all your main guys for right now. Isaiah Buggs isn't going to be a starter in the future. Like that ship has sailed. But Carlos Davis and Isaiah Loudermilk, both of those guys still have the opportunity to really grow into something. And I think, and Henry Mondeau's past Isaiah Buggs. So I agree. I think Isaiah Buggs going and the Steelers keeping 7 make the most sense.
And you know what? Loudermilk, they invested way too much to get rid of him at this point. He's essentially a 4th rounder next year to them. And he's been improving and he's looked good in practice. So there's no way Loudermilk's going anywhere either, in my opinion. So it'll be fun to see how that one shakes down. Of course, Buggs and Davis were the people fist fighting, I believe, on the Ravens sideline last year. And now they're quite literally fighting for their Pittsburgh Steelers career. So we'll see how that one ends up and who's taking the jab and who's receiving it. So it'll be funny to see how that one kind of winds up. I'm sure there'll be a meme or two kind of revolving around that punch. The next position that I want to get into, I think it's probably best off to kind of lump them together, and that's both linebacker spots because the Steelers traditionally carry 9 linebackers total, inside and outside. 1 year it could be 5 outside linebackers. 1 year it could be 5 on the inside. Who are going to be that 5? Because currently the Steelers could quite easily carry 10 total, heck, even 11 at both positions combined. So how do you see this one shaking out?
Well, I think we have the first 4. They've been showing us the first 3 outside linebackers and the first 4 inside linebackers, where I think really Marcus Allen has already secured that spot, in my opinion. Obviously, that could change. It can change in the fourth, but he is definitely in the lead. He has a pretty nice lead, in my opinion, for that spot. So I think really on the inside linebackers, you're keeping obviously Bush and Schobert, but I think Spillane is your number 3 behind them, and Marcus Allen behind that, and then Buddy Johnson. And as I explained in my other podcast, like that puts a lot of pressure on the outside linebackers when you get past Melvin Ingram, and you get to Jerron Jones, and you get to Quincy Roche. They're fighting not just each other for a spot, but they're also fighting to see if both of them can stay. You've got to knock one of those inside linebackers off the roster, and you're not knocking the 4th round pick out very easily, and you're really going to have a hard time knocking out Marcus Allen. He has been phenomenal on special teams, and he has been significantly improved at linebacker this year. He is looking much better, much more comfortable, much more confident, and with better execution in the defense. He just looks very, very much improved.
Yeah. What's tough is they have so much talent on the edge. Like, to me, I'm just giving Cassius Marsh his golden ticket because we know how big of a fan I am of his, and try to keep room for both Jones and Roche. I know they're both not going to be long-term options on this team. But at least one of them might have a shot at developing. And right now, I feel like Jameer Jones is probably the leader when it comes to those kind of bottom 3 outside linebackers. So it'll be a decent kind of thing to watch. But whoever's taking that spot, it's going to be that last linebacker spot, the number 9 spot. It's going to be the best special teamer. That's what it comes down to. It's not going to come down to who's a great edge rusher. Like we saw that with Tuzar Skipper, who had a 4-sack game or whatever it was in the preseason. It didn't matter. He wasn't the special teams guy, and that's exactly what you need from your depth options at that position.
Well, that's one of my thoughts is we love Quincy Roche and Jerron Jones, but really, have either of them shown in this preseason what we even saw from Ola Adeniyi and Tuzar Skipper in the preseason? And neither of them were anything. Those guys weren't anything special in the NFL. And I honestly don't think Quincy Roche has shown up as well as Tuzar Skipper did. So I like some of his moves. I like some of his stuff, but I've got to wonder, is this guy a real NFL player? Is he was he a really talented college player who's just not big and strong enough to be an NFL dude? Is he going to be, like kind of the Jarvis Jones mold where, yeah, you can light up these other guys, but you get to the NFL and no one's intimidated by you. No one's worried about you. You're nobody.
Yeah. Oh, geez, that just brings up some bad memories. So we should move on to the next position battle. The outside cornerback spot opposite of Joe Hayden, first of all. I understand in sub packages the players could change from this, but who's going to be starting at that opposite corner spot?
Opposite of Hayden?
Yeah.
In the regular season or in this game?
In the regular season.
In the regular season, it's going to be Sutton. It's going to be Sutton. I don't think James Pierre can overtake Sutton for the number 2 guy. I think they're just going to slide Sutton inside because Pierre can't play nickel. They haven't put him there. He doesn't know the position.
It'll be interesting because Pierre's had a really good camp from most sources, and then he's played well in the preseason. We've been able to see it. He had that great game against the Browns in the playoffs. Oh man, I feel like he if he's not the starter in week 1, I think he will start a handful of games down the stretch. Like that's honestly how I feel with his development and how good he's looked over time. I think that's exactly how that could play out. But when it comes to the slot right now with the missing bodies, it seems like bouncing Sutton down in that spot and then putting Pierre on the outside is the most logical thing. Is that how you see that kind of wrapping up too?
That's how the Steelers will play it. I have been vocal about this from the start. I thought the best option really for the Steelers when Mike Hilton left was to see what James Pierre could do in the slot. See what he could be as the nickelback, and actually playing in the slot because he's more physical. He's got the execution. I think he really fits what you want in a nickel corner. The Steelers have not agreed with me, and they keep him outside where he's been very good, but you've also seen how he can get beaten a bit with he struggles with the quicker cuts, like those. If you just run straight at him and then cut inside, if you're able to do that well, he's not as quick to recover to that, and he will give up those passes, much like Steven Nelson did his in 2019, his first season here. So Pierre has some vulnerabilities. I actually like Sutton better outside than I like Pierre, and I would have loved to have seen Pierre get a shot at the nickel, but they didn't do that. So it looks like Cameron Sutton in the nickel is it, until teams make their cut downs and the Steelers add somebody, because I really, really believe the Steelers are going to add somebody to play the slot.
Yeah, and man, with the amount of money they freed up, I think something along those lines is coming as well. I guess before we wrap up the show today, a TJ Watt extension seems imminent. Is that for sure going to be done after within a couple hours of this Panthers game ending? Is this just a vet move on TJ's part? This deal's done. He just doesn't want to play any preseason games that no one's going to remember anyway. So what's the point? I'll sign the deal 1 minute after the game's done. Is that kind of what you're thinking?
Well, if you're a guy who is going to show up to camp when you're under contract and do what you're supposed to do when you get the deal you want, like, this is your chance. This is your one chance to sit out and not do the stuff you don't want to do, that nobody wants to do. You can pull that. He has the leverage. He can pull that. So I do think that is a thing. And I think the story of the fourth preseason game will be the announcement of TJ Watt being extended.
It'll happen during the game. Is this your bold prediction?
Yeah, that's think about the timing. That's perfect timing. That is absolutely perfect timing. You wait till halftime and you announce, oh yeah, by the way, we signed TJ Watt.
And then try to get more eyes on the game, sort of thing. Is that the mindset?
People whoa, we're talking about that. I think it would be a great thing.
Yeah, and it's a Friday. We know sports teams love Friday news dumps. Typically bad news, so they don't have to address it for a while. But that'd be a pretty good feel-good story heading into the weekend, a week before. Well, I guess technically a bye week for the NFL teams on the horizon after that. A few more minutes left, and Joe Hayden again was asked about it, extension talks. Do you think that is a deal that also could happen shortly thereafter TJ's is done?
I doubt it would be immediately after. I think they'll give it because that's another thing you can hide. You can hide bad news with under the Joe Hayden signing extension.
Yeah. Yeah, well, yeah, maybe a cut down day that comes out. So,
if they aren't able to sign a slot cornerback and they're stuck with what they have, they'll just be like, "But we extended Joe Hayden. Look at that
party!" You know what? There is one last position battle that we should talk about before we hang things up today. I'm sure you know exactly what's coming. The battle of everyone's favorite Pittsburgh Steelers player, one Presley Harvin III. Versus Jeff Hartman's one true enemy in life, Jordan Berry. Jordan Berry's been punting the best football he's ever played in his career somehow at this point in the game. How is this going to shake out? Is this for sure Presley's job? Are they going to try to trade Berry? Could we be blindsided here?
It better be Presley Harvin's job. Isn't this the hottest training camp we've had? Weather we've had for training camp in a long time.
And when's he at his best?
Yeah, if he could go down and play in Arizona and they cancel all games after September, he'd be the best punter in the world. Jordan Berry would just be phenomenal. I hope it's not about, because if you're taking preseason punts from a guy who has clearly shown he's better the warmer the weather is, if you're taking his play over the summer and you're ignoring what he has done in the actual seasons when the games are colder and the games matter and the weather's colder. I don't want that. I think Harvin has won the job. He is the best punter on this team. And I will be stunned and angry if Jordan Berry somehow has the Steelers get rid of Presley Harvin.
As would I, Geoffrey Benedict, as would I. Now, we are at the top of the show, so is there anything you want to plug before we end things for the evening?
Yeah, Vertex came out today on the BehindTheSteelCurtain.com, where Dave and I talked about Ben Roethlisberger. It actually didn't get a whole lot of views. Go check it out, man. Because I'm going to talk about the one play where Ben Roethlisberger threw the touchdown. Everyone talked about the pump fake that faked out the cameraman. It wasn't a pump fake. Ben Roethlisberger said, other people have said this, I'm not breaking any news here, but actually go down through the play and what happened, and you can see it. It's a case where Pat Freiermuth breaks past the linebacker. The safety is outside of him. Ben sees like a play that should be there, like what he should do, and Pat Freiermuth isn't on the same page. Go check it out. I laid it out really well. It's phenomenal how Ben Roethlisberger was able, partway into a throw, seeing that the tight end wasn't going to turn and look before the throw would have gotten there, and just reins it in, and then is still able to nail that pass, and Freiermuth is able to bring down a tougher catch. Phenomenal play. Go check out that Vertex and go see that one. That's really all I have. And my other show, The Cutting Room Floor, and watch that. Go listen to that, and the Live Mic. Live Mic's good too. It too is pretty good.
Oh, geez. Oh, thank you for that, Geoffrey. Now, I was going to say, breaking news, Ben Roethlisberger's good at football. Who knew? But, yeah, no, that's check out that Vertex. That play was incredible, and those articles deserve all the clicks in the world.
Also, if you want a hotter take, I would argue that Ben Roethlisberger is the most physically talented, pure physical ability that the NFL has ever seen. I would argue that because people just can't do that. The things he's done over his career, other people just can't do. He's just phenomenal, and you can imagine if he had had the motivation and the leadership and the willingness to watch film that he has late in his career when he was able to throw, Terrell Suggs to the ground with one arm. He would probably have been one of the greatest he'd be on the short list of greatest quarterbacks in the NFL history.
I mean, he's basically already there already. Yeah. Like, imagine
he's like, it's hard because anyone in this generation is second tier to Tom Brady. Like, that's just, you just start with this guy won all the Super Bowls, but then there were also these other people.
Yeah. Womp wah. Well, aside from that, Vertex, we should also remind you to click over to BehindTheSteelCurtain.com, which should be your one-stop shop for all things Pittsburgh Steelers, as we like to say. Tons of stuff from breaking news to commentary, film rooms, rankings, grades, you name it. We got it over on the website. So make sure you're clicking over to the website and click over multiple times a day. There's tons of content coming out. And speaking of tons of content, Geoffrey Benedict alluded to it earlier. There's 25 original podcast titles on our network now. So make sure you're clicking over to Spotify, Pandora, Apple Podcasts, wherever you get your podcast from. Hit subscribe, hit like, 5 stars, whatever it takes to be getting all these great content from BehindTheSteelCurtain.com. Make sure you're doing it because it matters. It really does. It helps us out, helps grow the brand more, and gives you even more of that great content we know each and every one of you love. So on behalf of my co-host, Geoffrey Benedict, my name is Michael Beck. Thank you for listening to Know Your Enemy. We'll see you guys soon.